Aquitaine originally referred to the area between the Pyrenees and the Garonne River, populated by non-Celts known collectively as Aquitanians. These peoples are the linguistic ancestors of the Basques and spoke a non-Indo-European language. This language, like modern Basque, is not related to most modern European languages such as Romance, Germanic or Celtic languages. The word Aquitaine may be of Proto-Basque origin, although its etymology has not been definitively established. The Aquitanians may be the direct descendants of indigenous populations that have been present in the region since at least the Bronze Age, and perhaps even earlier. In 1500 BC, for example, there were two major cultural groups in Western and Central Europe, the Atlantic culture and the Urnfield culture. The Aquitanians clearly descended from the Atlantic culture, while the Celts descended from the Urnfield culture. The latter appeared in the northern Alpine foothills from 1200 BC onwards. From there, they are believed to have initiated large migrations to the four corners of Europe, including Gallia. Some say from the 5th century onwards, others before, others after. In any case, it was a slow process that took place over several centuries and differed from region to region. In any case, this implies that there were other peoples in Gallia before the Celts, some of whom may have been related to the Aquitanians, and that they were either driven from their lands, acculturated, mixed, or even exterminated by the Celts, or a mixture of all these situations. All these migratory movements and cultural changes are easily proven by archaeology, but the names of the peoples who lived there before Celticization will remain forever forgotten. The Aquitanians, like the Celts of Gallia, would in any case end up being conquered by the Romans. In the case of the Aquitanians, they were conquered by Caesar, but above all by his legate Publius Crassus. It took him 2 years to conquer them, between 56 and 55 BC, because the different tribes had allied themselves to resist the invader. The Aquitanians waged a veritable guerrilla war, or war of attrition, and eventually surrendered following a terrible battle that led to their defeat. The Romans recognized the ethno-linguistic differences between them and the Celts, which earned the latter their own province. But during the reign of Augustus, in order to make this province truly viable, politically and economically, the Celtic territories between the Garonne and Loire rivers were added to it. This division would continue to exist much later in the medieval Duchy of Aquitaine and also in the modern region of Nouvelle Gallia Aquitania will be covered in 2 videos. The first will deal with the part populated by the Proto-Basques, while the second will focus on the Celtic peoples north of the Garonne and south of the Loire. Let's begin, if you don't mind, with the southernmost part of this province of Gallia Aquitania, on the border with Gallia Narbonensis, discussed in a previous video. Unlike the large Celtic confederations we saw in the previous video, the Aquitanians ruled small tribal kingdoms that were independent of one another. This union made Roman conquest all the easier, as these kingdoms were certainly not capable of raising large armies to resist the invader, even if they did occasionally form alliances in serious circumstances. The Consorani inhabited a territory north of the Pyrenees, between the Ariège and Garonne rivers. Today this corresponds to the departments of Ariège and Haute-Garonne. The name may mean the people of the wooded valley in Proto-Basque. Some of the Consorani may have lived beyond the Ariège river, but they were separated from the others during the conquest of Narbonensis and then integrated into the territory of the Volcae Tectosages. The Consorans west of the Ariège remained autonomous until the campaign of Publius Crassus. After the conquest, they are thought to have merged with the civitas of the Convènes. This people gave its name to the historic region of Couserans. The Convènes occupied a territory centered on the upper Garonne valley, in the current departments of Haute-Garonne and Haute-Pyrénées. Their capital was Saint-Bertrand de Comminges. This people seems to have been created by Roman interference. A disputed legend says that in 72 BC, General Pompey deported rebellious populations from Hispania to this territory on the margins of Narbonensis to form a client people. Among these deportees may have been Celts, hence the ancient name of Saint-Bertrand de Comminges, Lugdunum Convenarum, the hill of Lug of the Convènes. Lug is a major god in the Celtic pantheon. It is now more commonly accepted that the Convènes appeared later, during the territorial reforms implemented by the Emperor Augustus. He is said to have gathered together tribes from the Pyrenean foothills, the Garumni, part of the Consorani, and inhabitants of the Pyrenean highlands, giving rise to the Convènes. The name Lugdunum may have been a way for the Romans to commemorate Lyon, the capital of all Gaul, also known as Lugdunum. The name Convènes is of Latin origin and means those who gather, referring to different peoples who were brought together in the same clan. This term and this territory gave rise to the historic region of Comminges. The Aushi were a people whose territory is now part of the department of Gers. Their name is etymologically similar to Euskal, the name of the Basque language in Basque. Moreover, the Basque word itself is derived from Vascon, which is a Latinization of the term Euskal. All this to say that there is no doubt about the Proto-Basque identity of the Aushi. Their capital was the oppidum of La Ciutat, on the hills of the village of Roquelaure. It may have been one of the oppida conquered by Publius Crassus, because after the conquest, the capital of the Aushi was moved 10 kilometers south to the Gers plain. This is the site of the present-day town of Auch. The name of the town comes from this people. Living north of the Aushi, the Lactorites controlled a territory centered around Lector, to which they gave their name. Today, they are located in the Gers department, and the Lactorites also had territories as far as the left bank of the Garonne, which is now in the departments of Lot-et-Garonne and Tarn-et-Garonne. Their name means those of the rock in Proto-Basque, referring to their fairly hilly territory, and even the site of Lector itself, which was an oppidum on a rocky outcrop. Neighbors of the Vulcae-Tectosiges and therefore of the province of Narbonensis, they are thought to have forged links with Rome very early on. During Caesar's conquest, they collaborated peacefully, which spared them from battles and pillaging. South of the Aushi, the Bigeriones occupied a territory centered on the upper Adour Valley, straddling the current departments of Hautes-Pyrénées and Pyrénées-Atlantiques. Their name is thought to be related to the Basque Ibai Gori, which means Red River, perhaps the term they used for the Adour River. Their capital was the oppidum of Castelbiel, on the heights of the village of Saint-Lézère. However, following the conquest, it was moved to Tarbes, about 20 kilometers to the south. The Bigeriones gave their name to the historic region of Bigorre. Castelbiel once again became an important fortified site during the 5th century, during the Great Germanic Migrations, and remained the capital of Bigorre until the 11th century. It seems that the western part of the Pyrenees was even more divided, as the Romans mention a lot of small tribes whose history remains largely unknown. They all lived in what is now the Pyrénées-Atlantiques department. Among them were the Illurensis, who populated a territory centered on the Gave d'Oloron River. Their name simply means the inhabitants of Illuro, now known as Oloron Santa Marie. Illuro could simply mean the city in Proto-Basque. The Osidots populated the mountain valleys south of the Bigeriones and the Illurensis. Like the Auski, their name is related to Euskal. They gave their name to the Osso Valley, from which the Basque cheese Osso Irati takes its name. This mountain-dwelling people probably lived in small villages scattered throughout the valleys, most of which remain unidentified today. The Berkorats, also a mountain people but even smaller in number, occupied only the Barretos Valley, to which they gave their name. This could mean those of the Red Valley in Proto-Basque. The Sabourates or Sibulates lived in the Sézanne Valley, a tributary of the Gave d'Oloron. They gave their name to the ancient province of Saule, centered on the village of Molion-Lichard. Their name means those of the bridge or those of the ford in Proto-Basque. The Venarni populated a territory east of the Pyrénées-Atlantiques. The French viewers among you will surely have recognized in their name the historic region of Béarn. Their name means the inhabitants of the lower valley in Proto-Basque, indicating that they lived in a less hilly territory than their southern neighbors. Their capital is believed to have been the oppidum of Castera on the heights of the village of La Bastide-Montrégeau, which has been confirmed by excavations completed in 2023. Previously, it was thought that the capital of the Venani was located in Lesca, in the suburbs of the city of Pau. The oppidum of Castera could have held up to 5,000 inhabitants. It was therefore one of the most densely populated sites in pre-Roman Aquitaine. The Eleusates lived north of the Venani, the Auci and the Bigériones in a territory straddling the departments of Gers, Lot, Garonne and Landes. The etymology of their name is uncertain. Perhaps in Proto-Basque it meant the inhabitants of the Dark City. Their capital city was the oppidum of Esberus, located on the site of the castle of the same name. After the Roman conquest, this capital was moved 5 kilometers to the southeast, to the site of the ancient town of Oz. The name Ouz itself comes from the Eleusates. To the north of the Eleusates lived a small people who were much more famous than their neighbors, who were nevertheless much more powerful. Their territory was centered around the commune of Sos, straddling the current departments of Gers, Lot, Garonne and Landes. They were the only people south of the Garonne whose king's name is known during the conquest, Adiatuanos. Their name is clearly of Celtic origin and means ambition, which would suggest a Celtic identity for the Sotiates, or at least for their aristocracy. However, the name Sotiates itself is Aquitanian and in Proto-Basque means those of the woods. The Sotiates, like many peoples in the Garonne region, shared both Celtic and Aquitanian characteristics. Caesar particularly remembers their name and that of their king, as they were the first people to be attacked by his legate Crassus. They are described as stubborn, charging the enemy even when outnumbered. But they were ultimately defeated and forced to take refuge in their fortress at Sos, which itself eventually fell. The Sotiates surely served as an example, even if Caesar does not go into detail, as Sos never again became an important settlement site thereafter. The Tarusates lived west of the Eleusates and south of the Sotiates in a territory centered on the Adour River east of the present-day department of Landes. Their name probably means people of the Stony Land in Proto-Basque, referring to the highlands of Tursan, a historic region of the Landes from which their name derives. Their capital was the oppidum of Ere-sur-l'Adour, which remained in existence during the Roman period. They also gave their name to the commune of Tartas and the community of communes of the Pays Tarusate. It was here that Publius Crassus defeated the coalition of Aquitanian and several Iberian tribes. After this battle, the location of which is unknown, many tribes are said to have submitted, bringing the Aquitaine campaign to an end. The Tarbelli were one of the most widespread peoples among the Aquitanians, controlling a land of plains and hills on the Atlantic coast, on the foothills of the Pyreneans. Their name could mean those of the hills or those of the springs in Proto-Basque, referring either to the hilly country of Chalose, north of the Pyrenees, or to the many thermal springs in the region. Their territory also encompassed a large part of the French and Spanish Basque country and is now located in the departments of Landes and Pyrénées-Atlantiques. It is possible that, due to their power, the Tarbelli may have exerted influence or even hegemony over their neighbors at certain periods. But this remains to be proven. We know of the existence of proto-historic sites around Dax and Sourd de l'Abbaye in their territory, but there is certainly much more to discover. Their pre-Roman capital was probably in the Dax region, but it is said that the city of Dax is a Roman foundation built on a thermal spring. The details of their first submission to the Romans are unknown. All that is known is that they submitted to Caesar in 51 BC after their defeat by Crassus. But they declared secession in 49 BC. They then regained their freedom for 20 years, as the Romans were too busy on many fronts, especially during the civil war between Octavian and Mark Antony. It was not until 29 BC that the Tarbelli were subjugated by Rome once again, this time for good, when Octavian became emperor under the name of Augustus. The Caucasites were a people north of the Tarbelli and were probably dependent on them. Their name means those of the spirit or those of the heart in Proto-Basque. the Romans added the qualifier sexigniani to their name. No connotation here, as it simply means of the 6 banners, which would imply maybe a confederation of 6 tribes or localities. Mainly located in the Landes department, they mainly populated the region of the Great Lakes of the Landes. The largest, the lakes of Caso and Parentis, were once ancient rivers connected to the ocean. Natural and gradual silting gradually separated them from the ocean and, through the accumulation of rainwater, transformed them into lakes. Underwater excavations in these lakes have identified ancient settlement sites, including Iron Age villages. Their capital was probably one of these villages near the present-day towns of Sanguinet and Biscarrosse. The Boii, who lived north of the Cocosates, populated the Arcatian Basin region, which is also called the Bouc region after their name. This territory is in the present-day department of Gironde. Their name is most likely Celtic and can be linked to other Celtic tribes that gave their name to Bohemia, Bavaria, and even the city of Bologna in Italy. In Celtic, Boii is an adjective describing warrior qualities. However, some evidences show that the Boii could have been a mixture of Celts and Aquitanians, which is very likely in this cultural border area. Their capital was La Motte, between the modern villages of Letech and Biganos. The name Biganos comes from the Boii. To the east of the Cocosates and north of the Tarusates lived the Vassates, also in the Gironde department. Their name means those of the valley or those of the forest in Proto-Basque. Their capital was Bazas, to which they gave their name. Langon was probably their port on the Garonne. Apart from that, very little is known about the pre-Roman history of the Vassates. Pliny the Elder is the only one to refer to the Vassates and the Boii as one and the same people, whom he calls the Bassabocates. If this merger may have been a reality in pre-Roman times, it disappeared after the conquest, as the two peoples had distinct administration. Although the Celts were once much more numerous in Gaul than the Aquitanians, only the language of the latter has survived to the present day. A large proportion of the Aquitanians, especially those in the plains who were more likely to experience urban civilization, became Latinized and adopted the ancestral languages of Gascon, which is part of the large family of Occitan languages. However, certain mountain populations, often isolated and self-sufficient, preserved the language of their ancestors through the ages. These mountain dwellers were of little importance to the Romans, as long as they did not cause any problems and facilitated trade and human traffic across the Pyrenees. The Pyrenees received few or no Latinizing settlers, and the inhabitants did not seek to Romanize themselves. The fall of the Western Roman Empire allowed them to regain their independence for a time, and the Germanic kingdoms of the Franks and Visigoths never really succeeded in subjugating them. One example is the famous episode at the Roncevaux Pass, which inspired the Song of Roland. Charlemagne's Franks, returning from a campaign against the Arab Muslims of Spain, were reportedly surprised by a Basque attack in the Pyrenean pass of Roncevaux. The Basques are said to have swept down from the mountains to decimate the Frankish rearguard, killing its commander Count Roland in the process. This episode encapsulates everything that makes up the aura of the Basques, a mixture of ethnic consciousness, isolationism, rejection of foreign powers, one might even say nonconformism, which has enabled them to survive to this day on both sides of the Pyrenees.
Ardiak goberna nintzan, plantatu nintzan, harzaintzan,